The Bible, a sacred text full of fantastic stories about an astonishing supernatural force.
And if that force were not God, what if they were UFOs?
What was that glowing wheel within another wheel that appeared to the prophet Ezekiel? In the Sodom and Gomorrah of Genesis, where did the fire and stones that destroyed everything come from?
In the Exodus, what was that presence in the sky that guided Moses through the desert?
Were they divine acts? Or could those mysterious celestial forces have been UFOs in the Bible? Throughout the Bible, mysterious aerial phenomena occur that alter the course of human history. For religious scholars, these stories are infallible proof of God's presence and divine actions. But some modern researchers argue a different theory. Perhaps these stories recount real alien visitations.
Is it possible that extraterrestrials have been involved in human history for thousands of years? And if so, did they come into contact with biblical figures? When studying the Bible, one notices many accounts of UFOs contacting humans, such as the chariot of fire that finds Elijah and takes him up to heaven.
Elijah was one of the most respected Jewish prophets of his time. According to UFO experts, the biblical account of their encounter with a chariot of fire is a detailed description of what could be called a UFO. The meeting took place when Elijah was traveling along the Jordan River, accompanied by his successor. Elijah knew his life was in danger because he had offended many powerful religious figures.
Elijah asked God to help him. He was accompanied by a young man, also named Elijah, who suddenly found himself surrounded by several chariots of fire.
Elijah saw a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated from him and ascended in a whirlwind to heaven.
In the Old Testament, there is a story about how Elijah was caught or absorbed by a chariot of fire that shone incandescently.
According to that passage, Elijah evaporated into the sky, and no mortal ever saw him again.
The concept of Elijah being taken up into a chariot of fire is an abduction. It is true that modern UFO reports say they take people on board and take them away. I think what appears in those reports is something very similar to what took Elijah to heaven. If we take what was described about Elias and compare it to the cases of people being taken aboard unidentified flying objects, it could very well be the same type of event that took place at that time.
What we call a chariot of fire has nothing to do with what we imagine a flying saucer to look like. But some argue that in reality, they weren't that different.
Chariot is a term that means some kind of transportation, and at that time, the closest thing they could compare a flying saucer to was a wagon. It was a means of transportation that shone and had a shiny appearance.
It was probably the only association they could find for those celestial transports.
Some speculate on the traditional interpretation that many passages in the Bible are manipulated not only by the lack of technical references by its editors, but also by inaccuracies in the English translation of the Bible that was carried out in 1611 at the court of King James.
The English used at the court of England in the 17th century was different from the English used by the common people for a specific reason. Courtiers would know how to distinguish themselves from commoners.
To better understand the original meaning of biblical texts, researchers refer to Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, a book published in 1890 with an alphabetical index of every word that appears in the Bible and a list of all the occurrences of that word and the contexts in which it is used.
Based on this book, some researchers believe they have discovered another connection between the Elijah story and UFOs. In the King James Version, Elijah says he ascended into heaven, but some believe he was not referring to the kingdom of God.
In the court of King James, the word heaven meant exclusively heaven. In the hundreds of times in which the name heaven appears, it means physical heaven. It does not, in any case, refer to the kingdom of heaven as a reward.
Biblical stories about strange celestial events are not the only ancient sources that describe UFOs.
Religious beliefs involving UFOs are present in all cultures. They are present in the oldest Sumerian texts, they appear painted on the walls of Egyptian tombs. Eastern yogis and lamas call them imanas, or chariots of the gods.
Thousands of years ago, the Nazca culture of Peru, in a feat of masterful precision, designed perfectly straight lines that stretched across the landscape for almost 60 kilometers in length and 1.5 kilometers in width. Some UFO experts wonder if that design, which resembles modern airports, might have been used as a landing strip for alien spacecraft. The lines intersect, forming enormous geometric figures, and include drawings of insects, mammals, and a mysterious humanoid being. Some say he looks like an astronaut.
They can be seen from the sky, and one has to wonder if they weren't drawn to impress beings flying through it. The culture that drew them was at least trying to capture the attention of the extraterrestrial beings they knew existed.
There are other ancient civilizations that also believe they were visited by extraterrestrial beings. Kukulkan, the principal god of the Maya, had descended from the sky to teach them his complex technological and mathematical knowledge.
The advanced mathematical knowledge of the Maya is one way to demonstrate that such a possibility exists. Highly sophisticated astronomical charts appear in their codices, recording solar and lunar eclipses.
The belief that the Maya received their mathematical and astronomical knowledge from ancient gods who descended from the sky I believe has its origins in a real event, because this same story is repeated throughout the world, with the indigenous peoples of South and North America, in China, and throughout Eastern India. This is that story, or a similar version, in which the gods come from the sky and share their knowledge with human beings.
These are disturbingly similar stories, repeated in different cultures throughout the centuries, and which raise new questions.
I believe UFOs have existed for centuries, and I believe they have flown over the Earth and even landed and made contact. I believe they have contributed certain things that have helped us develop, and I believe the biblical religion is an example of how they have influenced our development.
The exodus of the Jews from Egypt was a pivotal moment in the development of the Judeo-Christian religion. At the head of this mass migration was Moses, who was guided by a mysterious celestial phenomenon. The Lord appeared to them during the day as a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and at night he transformed into a pillar of fire to illuminate their path. In this way, they could travel both day and night.
It's a particularly intriguing element of the story for modern UFO experts. Who or what was that protector?
I think it was a very large UFO. It turned off during the day and glowed at night, providing light to the camp set up below. Sometimes it hovered in the air for several months at a time.
The pillar of cloud by day and fire by night that guided the Exodus chose an object in the sky. It apparently contained some kind of intelligent beings who communicated orally with Moses throughout the journey. The UFO was playing the follow the boss game, and the UFO was the boss.
Although Pharaoh initially allowed the Israelites to leave, he later changed his mind and attacked them with all the chariots of Egypt and hundreds of thousands of his men. This pursuit led to one of the most spectacular events in the Bible, when Pharaoh's armies caught up with the Israelites at the shores of the Red Sea.
I believe that the entity that flew over the Red Sea caused the parting of the waters.
There is a theory that claims the extraterrestrial object's propulsion system parted the waters, allowing Moses and his followers to cross the sea. Then the Lord told Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea so that it would swallow the Egyptians, their chariots, and their horsemen.
In my opinion, the parting of the waters was caused by some kind of anti-gravitational force. The people of the Bible wouldn't have been able to explain it even if they had witnessed it. But I believe that if someone had witnessed it in the modern era, they could have given us a scientific explanation of what seemed supernatural to the ancients.
Even after escaping the Egyptians, the Jews embarked on an arduous journey toward the promised land of milk and honey.
The path was shown to them by a cloud that both guided and protected them.
The pillar of clouds that guided them during the day acted as a parasol. The area they were traveling through was a desert with temperatures up to 50 degrees Celsius, and it took them 40 years to arrive.
The pillar threw manna to the coral Jews to feed them during the 40 years of their exodus, thus keeping them alive in the desert, while a huge religious conditioning project was being developed by the extraterrestrial entity.
Some modern interpretations claim that the UFO provided them with much more than food and shelter. As the Israelites approached the slopes of Mount Sinai, the pillar of cloud communicated with Moses again. The Lord told Moses to rise early and descend Mount Sinai and appear before him at the top of the mountain.
When Jehovah landed on the summit, he warned the people to move aside, but allowed Moses to go up. And apparently, Moses went up to the craft that was on the mountain.
Then Moses went up the mountain, which was covered by the cloud. The Lord appeared this time in the form of a blazing fire on the mountaintop in the sight of all the people of Israel. And Moses entered the cloud.
Modern theorists speculate that he spent his time on the mountain inside a UFO.
And when he reached the mountain, his face was sweating. This implies some kind of energy transmission between him and that extraterrestrial entity.
When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he carried in his hands the 10 Commandments, the supreme laws for his people. Then he approached the people of Israel, and he gave them the commandments that the Lord had commanded them to obey. But what if that enormous column in the sky was indeed a UFO, and it delivered a moral code for the Jewish society? What did the ancients think of it?
According to Moses, the individual inside the pillars of fire and cloud was Jehovah. Jehovah is the name of the national god of the Jews. Their god was a sky god, a celestial god, a god who created heaven on earth. I don't think the Jews would have much trouble believing that the pillar of cloud and fire was God. God was in that UFO.
Some believe that the influence of UFOs is not limited to the Jewish Bible. It can be found in the Christian faith thousands of years after the Exodus, as the New Testament recounts the transfiguration of Jesus. And he was transfigured before witnesses. His clothes became so dazzling white that there was no lime on earth that could whiten them more.
Then Elijah and Moses appeared and began to talk with Jesus.
It was surprising to find Moses and Elijah with Jesus, because Moses had been dead for hundreds of years, and Elijah had never died on earth, because he had been taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire and had not been seen again until then.
Were Elijah's chariots of fire and Moses' bright cloud on Mount Sinai the same entity? And was that same UFO cloud the one that transported Elijah and Moses to the transfiguration of Jesus?
I believe this is a recurring phenomenon in the Bible, a strange object appearing in the sky and a voice emanating from it. It appears during the Exodus in the form of a pillar of cloud that Moses speaks of, and it appears in the account of the Transfiguration. Every time we see biblical prophets saying strange things, could it be an extraterrestrial entity providing the information to their minds so they could say the things they said?
More than half a millennium before the birth of Christ, a group of Jewish exiles were held captive on the banks of the Kebar River. Among them, a devout Israelite named Ezekiel had become a prophet, foretelling the fall of the kingdom of Israel. He also preached a message of hope and salvation, but before that, Ezekiel had been abducted by a celestial being.
When I looked, there was a stormy north wind approaching. And a great cloud surrounded by brightness with a continuous fire burning. And in the midst of the fire was the most resplendent bronze.
Ezekiel believed that this event was an encounter with God.
But UFO experts wonder if it could have been something more. UFO researchers have analyzed and studied Ezekiel's detailed account of this encounter more than any other passage in the Bible and believe it was an encounter with aliens.
I saw a wheel on the earth. As to the appearance of the wheel and its manufacture, it shone with the radiance of a crystal light.
Ezekiel describes a spinning, shiny, flying metallic object that descends and lands in front of him.
In the modern era, rotating, shiny, metallic flying objects have been observed ascending and descending, just like those described in the Bible. It is not an illogical conclusion to assume that the ships seen now are the same ones described in the Bible in ancient times.
The construction consisted of one wheel inside another. It could be steered in any direction without having to turn.
It is clear that Ezekiel had a lot of trouble describing his vision, and it is a characteristic of UFO sightings that the people who see them have problems explaining what they have seen, just as happens in the Bible.
The four wheels had spiked edges and were surrounded by eyes.
He was trying to describe mechanical devices. And at that time, no mechanical devices existed.
The wheel was the most sophisticated device they possessed. When the wheels floated above him, Ezekiel thought he was witnessing something supernatural. But what if it was merely high technology? How could he distinguish between the supernatural and the technological? The more sophisticated a technology, the more supernatural it seemed.
And from her emerged what appeared to be four living creatures. They followed her spirit wherever she went, and the wheels rose with them, because the spirits of the living creatures were within the wheels.
Describe an object that comes out of the mountain and releases some kind of intelligent life from within it.
As for the appearance of their faces, each one had the face of a man in front. They had the face of a lion on the right side. All four had the face of an ox on the left side. And all four had the face of an eagle behind them.
At that time, there was nothing similar in the sky. There were no airplanes or helicopters, no kites or even balloons. In his time, nothing moved unless it was alive or someone moved it, which is why the analogy of living creatures was used.
Above the heads of the living creatures was the representation of a firmament as bright as crystal. And when they departed, I heard the sound of their wings, similar to the sound of many waters, like the sound of the thunder of the Almighty.
He sees a sky, a very large object. Many engineers who have studied the subject believe it to be a landing craft. They describe lights that rise and fall, rings of twinkling lights surrounding them, and speak of a being that emerges from the craft in the sky above him and speaks to him.
If the visitors were extraterrestrials, why did they appear to Ezekiel?
This encounter may have put Ezekiel in a state of mental control that prompted him to write his long book of prophecies about the future of Israel and the political and economic consequences that would follow. I don't know, but this is one of the key concepts that geologists will have to study once the existence of UFOs is accepted.
Angels, the messengers of God. Their ethereal images have appeared in art and architecture throughout the millennia across the globe. Mentioned hundreds of times in the Bible, angels were present at some of the most significant events in ancient history. But what are angels?
Some UFO experts wonder if angels and aliens are the same thing.
I dare to speculate that the angels of the Bible and the Quran possess the same powers and supernatural faculties as the occupants of the ships, whom we now call extraterrestrials.
According to the Bible, St. Peter, patriarch of the Catholic Church, was saved by an angel with mysterious powers.
The Apostle Peter was imprisoned to ensure that he did not escape, and he was also chained inside the cell, and a guard was placed sleeping on either side of him.
And an angel of the Lord appeared to him and made the cell shine brightly, touched Peter on the side, and woke him up, telling him to get up quickly. And the chains fell from his hands. And the angel took Peter out of his cell among the unconscious guards.
When the angel and Peter left the prison door opened by itself.
And they went out and crossed a street, and immediately the angel left him. But the Bible passage does not explain how the angel entered the cell.
The answer may be that the angel had the ability to pass through solid walls, a fact that often appears in modern UFO reports.
Modern theorists have also examined other angelic passages in the Bible for possible extraterrestrial connections, finding many descriptions of events similar to alien encounters. Often, angels convey their message through visions and dreams.
Aliens from space used our unconscious mind, our dreams, to inform us of their will. This happens, for example, in Matthew 12.
And an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you."
Joseph is warned in a dream that he must leave the city in haste because Herod is going to try to kill Jesus.
Heeding his dream, Joseph took his son to safety and saved Jesus' life.
The theme of dreams plays an important role in Judeo-Christian psychic life. We don't know how much of this is due to direct extraterrestrial intervention. If we go back to Abraham in the Old Testament, there's a passage in Genesis that says, "The Lord caused Abraham to fall into a deep sleep, and through a dream, God communicated to him everything he wanted to convey."
But Abraham also physically interacted with angels. Although they were known to be supernatural beings, these celestial creatures were often mistaken for mere mortals.
In the book of Genesis, there is a story about Abraham in which three beings come to see him. He doesn't know that they are not ordinary humans, and following Middle Eastern custom, he receives them like a good host and invites them to eat, asking his wife Sarah to prepare the meal for them.
The visitors seemed normal, but soon displayed strange powers.
In the end, the men tell Abraham that his wife Sarah is going to conceive and give birth to 2 children. Abraham believes this is something impossible to believe.
His wife Sarah, who was outside the tent, hears him and laughs inwardly but silently. The 3 men accuse her of laughing, which she denies. However, this implies that they could read his mind telepathically. The question of telepathy and whether or not these beings could read Abraham and Sarah's minds is a very important issue.
Telepathy is also a trait often associated with modern extraterrestrials.
And then they leave, and she becomes pregnant. In time, Abraham realizes he's had what he calls a divine encounter, but I think we could now call it an extraterrestrial encounter.
That year, Sarah gave birth to her son Isaac, from whom the dynasty that founded the Jewish nation originated.
One of the things that appears in many reports about UFO abductions is that extraterrestrials seem to be very interested in the human reproduction process. In the story of Abraham and Sarah, it is possible that aliens took part in the reproductive process between Abraham and Sarah, and that Isaac was the product of some kind of alien intervention. What we might call extraterrestrial stories from the Bible contain elements of psychic control over the human race, or if not all of humanity, at least some chosen ones. When we hear the prophets say strange things, we wonder if it wasn't extraterrestrials who were influencing their minds to say what they said.
Most of the biblical events that UFO experts define as being caused by extraterrestrial intelligence tend to have benign or beneficial effects, but this is not always the case. For example, in the case of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, according to the Bible, the inhabitants of these two sister cities were so sinful and degenerate that there was no hope of leading them back to the right path. The only solution was total extermination.
And the Lord rained down rocks and fire from heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed both cities. In his 1968 book, Memories of the Future, Eric von Daniken puts forward a different theory about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Eric von Daniken speculated that Sodom and Gomorrah could have been destroyed by extraterrestrials using nuclear weapons. The reason he came to that conclusion is the description of fire and rocks coming from the sky. If we were to conclude that extraterrestrials destroyed entire cities because they didn't like them, it would be a very quick way to get the attention of planet Earth.
However, there are other theories about the destruction of those cities. Some believe that the story could have been used as a mythological warning, a lesson learned from generation to generation to reinforce the importance of morality.
God exterminated the Sodomites and the citizens of Gomorrah. Fire and stones fell from the sky and wiped them off the face of the earth. The text teaches us that when a civilization degenerates, it cannot be saved.
Another way to understand Sodom and Gomorrah is that if those cities truly existed and were destroyed, they were destroyed by a natural disaster. It's a metaphor for the religious concept that humanity is inherently evil and deserves punishment for its wickedness.
Archaeological investigations have shed some scientific light on this ancient story.
Archaeologists excavating on a plain southeast of the Dead Sea found the approximate location of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah.
The remains of those cities, called Babadra and Numeria, provide valuable data to clarify the truth about Sodom and Gomorrah.
At Babadra, evidence of a cataclysmic event can be observed on the mound where the city stood. At Numeria, a layer of ash suggests that the city suffered a fire.
But the cause of its destruction cannot be scientifically proven. Therefore, who or what caused the debacle remains open to speculation.
The most important question is whether extraterrestrials were so involved in the development of life on Earth that they decided to destroy a city or a group of people.
The idea that God and the biblical angels were UFOs from another planet might seem radical, but modern theorists may not have been the first to consider this possibility. 15th century artworks depicting biblical scenes with mysterious flying objects hovering in the sky began to appear.
I find Renaissance art very intriguing. There are images of UFOs with the image of the Virgin Mary and of Jesus crucified. Sometimes small black dots or saucer-shaped UFOs with a dome on top are painted in the background. And these are works of art created 1,500 years after the events actually occurred.
To the observer, it's a kind of Rorschach test. The drawings, paintings, and works of art are open to different interpretations. They could be hats, pieces of cableware, or anything with a similar shape, but not necessarily flying saucers.
But more and more people believe that UFOs exist and that they are aliens. Even organized religion has not completely ruled out the possibility of extraterrestrial life.
The Vatican released a statement saying that UFOs should not be feared or demonized. Monsignor Carlo Balducci, who is an advisor to the Vatican, has appeared several times on Italian television stating that UFOs and extraterrestrials exist.
If these theories are proven true, what will be the future of Western religion?
Western religion would change completely if extraterrestrials were proven to exist. The entire content of the Bible and the way we interpret it would change. The miracles described in the Bible could be explained by the existence of aliens with advanced technology.
But in the absence of conclusive evidence that confirms or denies the existence of UFOs, belief in the UFO phenomenon is based primarily on faith, which is the same basis as belief in God.